Hey everybody, this is Alan Stanton from the Turner Center at Martin Methodist College. We are continuing in this video series where we're inviting leaders in the church to talk about how our churches are adapting in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And today we're really fortunate to have Meghan Killingsworth. She is the pastor or co-pastor of Sanford First United Methodist Church in Sanford, Florida. And we're thrilled to have you today, Meghan.
Thanks, Alan.
So I wanted to kick off by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your church and how your church is changing in the midst of this time.
Well, like you said, my name's Megan, and I'm one of the two pastors at First United Methodist in Sanford. So my husband, David, is the other pastor, and we're bivocationally appointed. So our context is we're in a downtown church that's 146 years old this year. And our church is a small congregation with large buildings. So the perception from the community is that we're larger than we are, but we are a congregation that is extraordinarily formed by a desire to gather folks across lines that otherwise would separate us. Now, obviously, that is a really interesting mission right now because our job is to not gather people across any lines. So what we're trying to do is figure out what it looks like to be a community that gathers and connects folks, even when we can't do that in person. We're asking a lot of questions about how we determine what transitions from an in-person ministry to a digital ministry, and then what new opportunities exist now that folks have more time and space at home. So one of the things I'm learning is that there were a few studies, a few gatherings I had shied away from because I thought people are too busy. So there's this workbook on spiritual formation that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but it's like 2 hours worth of work every week.
Oh, wow.
Well, now everybody's got time. So we've had these we're learning that the things that are difficult also can be some opportunities for us to explore new ways to connect folks and to do ministry together.
Cool. One of the things that you have talked with groups that come to Martin Methodist College before about is leading with your assets and leading with your strengths. You're not a large church, and you tend to sort of celebrate that you're a small membership congregation. And so I'm kind of curious, what do you see as the strengths of your congregation right now, and how are those shaping what you're doing as a congregation?
Yeah, I'm sure you've read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that was really powerful to me in that book was the way in which he pointed out that human beings do well when they can all maintain personal relationships with one another. I'm not knocking, larger groups, but the cutoff, I believe in that, was 130 or 140 folks. Oh. And so what has been really helpful for me is to lean into the fact that our church probably averages 85 or so on a Sunday morning. There's more people who consider our church their church, but they engage in ways other than Sunday morning worship. And so what's been really cool is that our community is small enough that those personal relationships already exist. I think I've been really proud of and excited about the way that our congregation and its personal relationships with each other has already been a gift. So I didn't have to tell people, make a call list and start calling the folks you're most worried about. Our community has always seen shared pastoral care as a call. So that's been really, really incredible as a small church. It's very lay driven. Our church very much has high levels of important leadership from our lay folks. And so a lot of the most generative ideas have come from lay folks in the community who've just imagined or understood new ministries or ways that we could better connect. So I've loved that. One of the other things that I have loved is a lot of our folks, because our town is small, live pretty close together. So a lot of the church folks have already determined who it is that needs to to pick up groceries for others, who it is that needs to gather these other supplies. Is there a way to kind of organize the community together? So that asset of folks living close together, the asset of folks already having personal relationships, and the asset of being a lay-driven church means that I didn't immediately feel like, oh my goodness, now it's my job to perform 10 times more because the only thing that's happening that's church is whatever I'm putting on a screen for people.
Right.
That asset of already having well-connected community members and folks who very much see ministry as their job is like, it's a great gift.
That's awesome. You have a community that has a high homeless population, and your church does a lot with the homeless community. And so part of me is curious, like, how are you continuing outreach to those populations and those groups?
So we used to have 3 hot meals a week on our campus. They were each organized a little differently. So one of them is its own 501c3 that's hosted on campus. The other is a network of churches that shares a meal-based ministry, and the other is a group of retired engineers who have the most organized and beautiful system I have ever seen. It's amazing.
Engineers, right?
Yes, I love it. Yeah. What's been really cool is we knew we couldn't do hot meals that gathered 100 people into one room to hug and celebrate birthdays and sit close to each other. So we wanted to get together and figure out how could we share resources in the most effective way. So obviously shifting from community building to disaster relief is a really different perspective. So what we've decided to do is combine the assets and the efforts of each of those groups, pool the resources, and instead of providing hot meals that would feed somebody one time on one day, we would use those funds to purchase through the Picnic Project, which is the nonprofit that's housed on site, a partner ministry with us. They have the capacity to buy food through Second Harvest. So if we did cash donations, then we could increase the amount of food that could be given. And then we could also have volunteers come and assemble the bags so that folks can have that, gloves, masks, make sure we do all the preparation appropriately. So we've been doing that not only for our unhoused folks, but for folks who find themselves newly out of work. We have a lot of restaurants and bars in our community. So that meant a bunch of folks very quickly who are living paycheck to paycheck needed support. So that's one of the things. And the other is we always see our job as advocacy. Mm-hmm. It's really different when someone is a person who's on the streets and people just know them as that guy in the park versus this is my friend and he's a member of my congregation.
Right.
So I have spent a little bit of time with our emergency management folks from the county and from the city and from the cops, having conversations about the ways in which we consider our unhoused neighbors in a time when everyone's supposed to shelter in place and they already didn't have shelter.
Right.
When you close public parks and public restrooms, that means that folks who already didn't have adequate access to hygiene definitely don't have that now, hygiene items. So we're trying to provide emergency food needs. We're trying to be a clearinghouse for appropriate information. A lot of folks don't have internet access because the library is closed.
Right.
So we want to provide good, solid, quality information for folks who don't have that. And then we also want to advocate for, folks who might be forgotten when we're kind of making community policies.
That's awesome. It sounds like a lot of this is very, very lay driven. So you mentioned like your team of engineers who are designing efficient systems because that's what teams of engineers do. How did you get to a point where you were comfortable handing that over? Was that a long-term thing that's kind of happened, or was that something that just sort of happened in the middle of this uncertainty? What did that look like?
That's very much in the DNA of our congregation. Being a small church and being a lay-driven church means that I think somewhere along the way, clergy have given lay folks the impression that in order for them to do ministry, like I need to say, yes, that's a good idea, and I'll make a flyer for it, or I'll announce it, or I'll do whatever. In our congregation, Dave and I are both part-time, Every person on our staff is part-time except for our director of community engagement. And he's only full-time because he can live on pennies. So we literally don't have the staff to be kind of a staff-centered ministry. So the team of engineers is actually from an Episcopal church down the road. They have retired engineers and a budget, and they want to be able to connect with the community. And because we have the space and the relationships, we're able to partner in that way. So I think what's been really cool is that that was part of the DNA of this church before, and we've just really tried to lean before I got here. And we've just really tried to lean into it, that's a gift and not a hindrance.
I think that's one of the cool things about small membership churches in general is that there's there's like this huge capacity for lay leadership already there. I remember in my last parish, I was part-time for the first 6 months, and I loved it because they would take an idea and just run with it. And sometimes they would tell me about the idea, which I kind of preferred, and sometimes they would just do it.
Yes.
But I love the small church because of that sort of relational atmosphere.
Yeah, when I thought it was going to be my bright idea to make an organized call list, by the time I came up with that idea, 3 of my congregation members had already called me to check on me and make sure that I'm okay.
You were like on their call list already.
Yes. It's like, great idea, Megan. No, just kidding. And it's my lay leader that's putting all of that together. I mean, she's the one, she can literally sit in the room in her mind, and she knows the names and neighborhoods of the whole community. So she can lay out who is it that can call, who is it that might need support for groceries or running for supplies or whatever. Yeah, it's amazing.
Do they do the thing where like this person's related to this person and down the line,
Yeah, or like that person was a teacher at this school with that person, and so they can call, and then this person worked for the tax collector's office, so they know the bankers, so they like.
Oh yeah, I love how like it's just this organic natural web that spans the entire community.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. So because I mean, like all of our churches are having to shift really quickly, and I mean, we're leading in the midst of this sort of neutral zone, but it's also a crisis, and we're having to phase things out and pause things. You have a really large mission that you're about to launch that I won't spoil, but how are you, leading that an effort and that initiative while also not being able to do all the things you want to do?
Well, I think you're talking about the co-op.
I am.
Yes. So we are creating a cooperative space for nonprofit and social enterprise groups to share space, to create collective impact, and to make each other better together than we ever would have been apart. Obviously, bringing together leaders and community members from lots of different organizations feels crazy right now.
Okay.
All of our ministry is based around bringing resources and folks together. So we have tried to figure out what it looks like as a community collective to prepare for beyond right now. So one of the things we know is that in disaster, there's a lot of hands and a lot of dollars available. What's more difficult is what happens to folks when middle income folks have recovered, and when people who otherwise had a crisis, but that crisis passed more quickly, what's left for lower income community members or folks who have issues of inequality that existed before the crisis. And so for us, what we're trying to figure out is how do we plan right now for recovery? So there's a lot of folks doing disaster work, and we're a disaster relief site for food distribution. But how do those organizations collectively plan for recovery after? So I think obviously our economy is going to be extraordinarily different, and small town economies built around bringing people together, which is mine, we'll have to figure out how do we not leave behind those folks who are already struggling, and how do we recreate a generative community that is better connected, is better considering one another.
And so you're starting those conversations now rather than down the line.
Yeah, we want to be ready for when everybody else is tired,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the gifts of being an institution. I know there's, especially in Methodist world, lots of like institution versus movement conversation. And that we need all of it. We really do. One of the great things about institutions is my church has actually already been through a pandemic. My church was around during the flu that happened in 1918.
Yeah.
So they didn't leave us good notes, but I want our church to be in our community, the sort of thing that you can count on the good days and the bad. And that's thinking beyond right now.
Cool. I have a couple more questions for you, but I want to turn a little bit to just you as a pastor. So you're bivocational, you're married, and you have a toddler. And so, my wife and I are in this middle of an adjustment as well. Like, we also have a toddler, and we're both working at the same college. And it's a big adjustment for us. I'm fortunate that I'm not serving church right now, and so I don't have to like also balance a congregation. But how are you living into that balance of both jobs, being a pastor, being a family member, and being a parent? How's that?
Thank you for asking that. It is every day. Every day I am trying to find ways to create space for myself to be a person. And I'm giving myself permission to not be able to do all the things. Usually I'm the sort of person, and you already know this, but I'm the sort of person who's like, I'll squeeze one more thing in. I'll just do one more meeting. I'll just have one more thing. And I feel like right now, I just know that I can't. And so yesterday we had a Zoom meeting with our leadership team. And as I am sitting in my chair, my son crawls over the computer and his face is hanging down on the computer like this. And my instinct was to freak out and think this is unprofessional and oh my goodness. And then I thought, these folks are at home. They understand that I'm a mom. They know I'm a person. And he actually brought some levity to a meeting that otherwise would have been difficult. So I'm trying to embrace the balance of all of those things as permission for me to rest, where I probably should have been doing more of that. And I feel very much like those communities that I'm trying to take care of are also trying to take care of me. So I've gotten so many calls, a few cards. We have a lot of folks in our congregation who do handwritten letters and cards. And I know lots of them who are like, y'all were trying to get us to send emails. Look at it now, like the personal touch of cards is what we need in this world. And they're right, so I think the grace that we need to have for ourselves and for each other is really palpable. So my answer is I'm not really balancing it. Yeah.
As best you can, right?
Yeah. I mean, how are y'all doing it?
We'll get there one day at a time. It really is it really, like, I travel a lot for my work, and I'm always in meetings, and like my calendar when I'm, in my office is just one thing after the other. And that's kind of how I prefer it. And so this has been I was joking with Abby the other day. I'm like, I love my daughter to death. I'm not cut out to be a stay-at-home dad. Like,
yes. I think parents all across this country are like, oh my goodness. First of all, teachers. Wow.
Right.
Second of all, stay-at-home parents. Like, how do you
do it?
I don't know. They're amazing. Oh, they're amazing. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's like, we just take it one day at a time. And I think one of the things that's nice about the small church is that if I was thinking back to when I was a pastor and my daughter was in the hospital with RSV, it was very much like if I let them, they took care of me. And if I was honest and vulnerable with them to say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. To be like, it was right before Christmas, and I remember just calling somebody in the church, and they're asking me a question, and I was like, I mean, my daughter's in the hospital, and they were like, "Oh, we'll do this for you.
Yeah.
You be with your family." And it was just like really amazing that they wanted to be that support network.
Yes. Yes. I had one lady in our congregation offer to read Mo books. Mo is my son for others who don't know that. On a video so that Dave and I could have a minute to ourselves. She said, I have some kids' books at my house, and I can FaceTime and read him some books if you guys, want to take a few minutes. And I just thought that was so sweet that she thought of us,
That's so sweet. That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
Yeah.
So my last question, well, one of my last questions, what are some of the things that are more of a struggle to you right now, leading the congregation, leading your community? What are those things that are kind of like frustrating that you're having to work through?
Well, one thing that's difficult is I have a congregation full of caretakers, and they're all the ones who want to do the work. I created a Google form to try and get people to sign up to call and to be called. And everybody signed up to call and no one signed up to be called. So I was like, okay, you guys, but we have to call somebody, and we all are going to need, we're going to need someone to ask us how we're doing. And fortunately, we already had some congregation members who were doing that, who were in the rhythm of calling folks all week. So that's one of the things is I've got whole generations of folks who are incredibly tough and who have spent their whole lives going through a whole lot of difficulty. And so for me, one of my challenges is how do I, without being able to be in person, offer the support that I think folks may need, but that they don't want to bother me with. I think one part of having compassion for your pastor is not wanting to overwhelm them or not wanting to, but one of my challenges has been, how do I give my full presence to folks so that they can know, if you need to fall apart, if you need to process something, if you just need to yell at somebody other than your spouse or your grandkids or whatever, like I can take it,
Yeah.
So that's been a challenge. And one of our other challenges is figuring out how we can maintain relationships with the folks who are newer to the church. So our people who've been there for a very long time know each other well and kind of jump into calls and stuff. But we're trying to figure out how we can connect with people who either are pretty new to the church, so they don't have a lot of well-connected relationships, or folks who have reached out to us through Facebook or through the church website just to say, we've had quite a surprising number of people say, I really miss church. I haven't been since I was a kid, but I think I need this, or I really need to talk to somebody and I wasn't sure who to contact. Yeah. So we're trying to figure out how to find the right tools, to connect with them.
Cool. So, as a pastor, as a mom, as a bivocational person, do you have any last words of wisdom or advice to everybody out there?
Well, I've been giving myself daily mantras. Yesterday's mantra was wash your hands and call your grandma. But so that's some good advice. Everybody wash your hands and call your grandma.
Yeah.
But I think today I'm feeling very much aware that all of us are more fragile than we give ourselves credit for. And so we should, hi Mo. So we should be the, sorry.
Hey Moses.
So we should be the sort of people who practice grace with ourselves and with others, because we are more fragile than we could have pretended a few weeks ago, but we can't now. And that's okay. That might be a gift.
Awesome. Well, we will let you go hang out with Moses. Meghan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alan. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Mo, would you want to say hi?
Bye.
Hi, Moses.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.